Let me just ask the group here, and we're a small group, so I'd like to kind of keep it as informal as possible because, and just like this young man said, it is still, even after 20 years of being in the business and speaking in front of groups, sometimes it does get absolutely nerve-wracking. So yes, absolutely, we do need to keep it informal. But the warden and I, we were talking about business, unfortunately on vacation. We were both in Galveston, Texas, at the same time, and I must have been there a day before you because Janice sent me a text and we were talking about business. And I said, I'll get back with you in a week. I'm actually in Galveston. She said, I'm going to be in Galveston that next day. So it was a neat, just two colleagues being in the same area. We didn't have plans. But has anybody been to Texas lately? Is it always that packed? It was, of course, it was spring break, but as soon as you pass, that huge casino just north of the Red River, once you go south of the Red River,
traffic, yes.
No matter what time of the day it was, it was just bumper to bumper, and it just felt like millions and millions of people. And my wife actually, she kind of woke up and said, "How fast are you going?" And I was going 85, almost 90 miles per hour, but it was just like with the flow of the traffic, it's just crazy. And that includes Dallas and Houston and all the highways in between. And no matter what what my phone said, it was the best route. It was still just the most packed experience of my life. And then we get to Galveston, on spring break, and everybody been to Galveston with the seawall and where you park and you try to park to go to a restaurant, and we had a great time. But oh my goodness, talking to Janice about our vacation just reminded me it was nice to actually live in Northwest Oklahoma. some breathing space. So, but again, I'm Jason Bryant. I'm the warden at James Crabtree, and for most of you, probably know where Crabtree's at. That's in Helena, America, just right down the road. And is anybody else a volunteer at Crabtree that I don't know? I know just one of you. Okay. Well, just a little bit about a history about Crabtree. We actually have some staff here. Becky and Tisha both. You didn't start your careers at Crabtree. You started them here, moved to Crabtree, and then you came back. So I don't blame you one bit. But Crabtree is a great place. I love my employees. They've done some wonderful things there. But just a little, I just love talking about the history of corrections. And Crabtree is very, very interesting. Where Crabtree sits, it obviously was not started as a prison. But I wrote down a few things about where actually the buildings that started in the turn of the century, of the 20th century, in 1904, they're not there any longer, but it's still very, very interesting. 1904, it was the Woods County High School. In 1909, it became the Alfalfa County High School. So I guess Woods County and Alfalfa County were combined. Anybody know? Yes?
M County.
We are to assume. Lynn?
M County.
What's that?
Both of them was M County.
Okay. 1917 was a Connell State School of Agriculture. So there's actually a college in Helena at one time back in 1917, and you've got a really cool picture of the original football team from Connell State. They're all look like they're about 150 pounds, and there's only 12 of them. So, but it's really, it's one of those nostalgic looking pictures. 1923 was the Helena High School. 1944 was the Western Oklahoma School for Children, which was what a lot of folks still call the orphanage, or the old orphanage in Helena. Between 1947 and 1982 was the Helena State School for Boys, and what a lot of folks still call the Boys Home. And in fact, I'm not sure that anybody's still working at Crabtree was employed from the old Boys Home. But just, I don't know, maybe just 10 years ago, some of those folks were getting to retirement, and it was interesting listening to some of those stories about when it was a boys' home. And in fact, in my office also is 3 other pictures, some original pictures of a basketball team, and a football team, and the baseball team. So those are really neat to look at. What's most interesting, it's just interesting to me, not that tattoos they're much more common these days, but in those days they were probably, I'd say this was about a picture from the late 60s, maybe early 70s, and these young men on the basketball team had some scribbles on their arm, with tattoos that said "Mom" or "Trouble," things like that. But you could really see those. It's really interesting to see how clear those pictures are. Ed Mayfield has some of you. I think you probably had those, Becky. Those original pictures. Yeah. Do you remember those?
The football team one was a postcard.
It was a postcard. Is that right?
That's the back of that postcard. You need to get that postcard.
Who has that? Joe Gwynn?
Joe Gwynn does.
Joe Gwynn should actually be up here talking about the history of Crabtree. So, and then in 1982, obviously, what happened then in 1982? Don't you guys know? Janice knows. What happened in 1982 in Helena? The state of Oklahoma turned it into a prison. And so from 1982, 83, it was originally a minimum security facility that housed around 300 to 400 offenders. Is that right, Becky? And then from there, we are where we are today. We house 1,150 medium security offenders, 224 minimum, which makes us the second largest state facility in the state of Oklahoma. Which for those like Warden Melton and Tisha and Becky, it's crazy, isn't it? It is crazy to think that James Crabtree Correctional Center is the second largest facility in the state of Oklahoma, state-owned. The private prisons obviously have well over 2,000, but we have almost 1,400 offenders, and that makes us the second largest. So we have our hands full. But some of the great things, I just want to talk about Crabtree, some of the great things that our staff do there. We have cognitive programming, we have education, we actually offer college opportunities from Northwestern. We have probably the largest, one of the largest head of cattle that the state of Oklahoma, besides Mac Alpha, probably in the southeast part of the state. We have 350 head of cattle right now on grounds that our minimum security offenders actually manage with us through, obviously a partnership that we have with Agri Services, which is part of the Department of Corrections. Something I'm very proud of is our 550,000 onion plants that we have in our garden. We don't have anything else in Northwest Oklahoma. We can plant tomatoes and lettuce and whatever else, but what Agri Services done, and what Agri Services is just a branch of Department of Corrections. The best thing that we can grow in Helena, America, in whatever, whether it's the soil, whether it's the sun, whether it's the moisture, probably, is onions. So we now have in the ground 550,000 onions. So we have several hundred acres of wheat, and this is very interesting. Whenever I went to Crabtree, February of last year, I moved my family there the summer of last year, and the most exciting part of their move, of me being the warden at James Crabtree, was their opportunity to see what everyone called the corn dog factory. The Department of Corrections, I don't know what that was for at one time, but when I transitioned over there, the building was called the Corn Dog Factory, and today it's still called the Corn Dog Factory. No matter what I try to say or the changes in the names, they still want to call it the Corn Dog Factory for obvious reasons. They made corn dogs. Help me out. It came in, the hot dogs came in with sticks, right? We took the sticks out, and then the inmates would process those hot dogs by dipping them in the batter, and they would go through a conveyor belt. They would fry, and then we would freeze them, we'd package them, and then we would send them through other facilities throughout the state of Oklahoma. Is that right, Becky? Anywhere else besides facilities? Obviously corn dogs are very popular, but they're also very expensive. So right now we have suspended the corn dog making. We haven't done it since I've been there. So we've kind of transitioned that plant, or that corn dog factory, into what's called a processing plant. So every vegetable that the Department of Corrections garden produces, it comes to Crabtree, and we process those vegetables. So when we process our 550,000 onions, you can smell it out. You can. It is extremely potent and strong. Yeah, you just walk out in Helena, anywhere you go, and if we're processing onions, you'll be watering, your eyes will be watering. But besides those good things that we do to keep the offenders busy, we also provide we have industry departments called Oklahoma Corrections Industry, and they have partnered with, this is very interesting, and sometimes when you first tell people in the community what these offenders actually do, it's almost alarming, but the Oklahoma Correctional Industries partners with private industry, and we have 50 inmates that actually solicit by telephone energy rights or energy futures or opportunity for other states, not Oklahoma, but other individuals in the state, like patrons, can decide what energy company they want to go with. And so in layman's terms, inmates get on the phone, they call and say, would you like to change your energy company? I think I could save you money. And they start that conversation, and they also complete the deal. Part two of this, we just started this, is where offenders will call and set up the opportunity for you to change your insurance company. And if you want to change your insurance company, then they transfer you to someone that actually brokers the deal. So when you first tell people how when you get those phone calls, those very annoying phone calls, could it be an inmate? It could be. It could be an inmate. But it's also, the idea of it is, not just to keep the offenders busy, but they make real money, and they're doing something that's very, very pro-social. They have to talk to people. They have to talk to people in the right way. So there's always, it's sometimes alarming to have people say, this person could be on the inmate trying to sell me something. On the flip side of this, they're actually doing something that's going to, it's better for their lives, whether they're in for a long time or they're going to be out tomorrow. It's a pro-social skill that's going to help them, be a better person in the future. So, but that's James Crabtree. What I wanted to talk to you about more than, obviously the reason that Mike brought me here is that when I started in this business about over 20 years ago, there was 12,000 inmates in the system. That 12,000 individuals that were incarcerated in the state of Oklahoma. And how I know that is that I was looking through a kind of a yearbook thing. Probably Becky put it together. I'm sure you did. No one else really wants to do it over there. But there's an article from Ed Evans. Does anybody know who Ed Evans is? Ed Evans is our associate director. He is responsible for all institutions in the state of Oklahoma. He's the second guy after the director, and then it's Mr. Evans. At the time, Mr. Evans was the warden at Crabtree between 1990 and 1997, and there's an article that Lynn wrote, and it was very interesting. He was actually doing a presentation in Kiwanis, and he was asked how many inmates are in the system now. 12,000. How many employees do you have in the Department of Corrections? 4,300. And he said, and that's just too many. That's too many inmates for 4,300 staff to take care of. And he's absolutely right. Today, that's too many. When you fast forward to 2016, we have almost 29,000 inmates in the system, and probably roughly, 38 to 4,000. Don't quote me, but I think that's about right. So we have more than doubled our population for whatever reason in the state of Oklahoma, and we've basically stayed the same with the number of staff that we have. So with that in mind, and to the stressor, we have a $1.3 billion deficit. Not million, but billion with a B. So the state is looking at $1.3 billion deficit on top of what some people call a crisis in corrections right now. So with all that, it sounds like that's bad news, but my 19 years at this location was absolutely so meaningful. It gave me the opportunity to actually, stray away from this this corrections nonsense that what we do in Oklahoma is just basically, they make a mistake. We have no other options for a young man or a person to do anything with, and so we just put them in the Department of Corrections. We're going to lock them up, and then hopefully when he gets out, and 90% of all of our inmates will get out within 5 years. Hopefully when he gets out, he's learned his lesson. Well, if we don't provide what you do as a volunteer, and what the employees do at Bill Johnson, in providing them education, providing them treatment, providing them some kind of behavioral modification, to hopefully change that behavior so that they don't become this cycle of incarceration that we see every day and every day we read about. Then if those things that you do right now don't happen, then that's what we're going to continue to see what happened when Mr. Evans was speaking in 1990 to where we are in 2016. We're going to see this increase and more flooding of offenders coming in because there's absolutely nothing that's being provided except for what you do. Now, I'm not saying nothing's going on in the state. There's lots of good things that are doing, lots of great things that are happening. But Bill Johnson and the employees here and what you provide and the services you provide as volunteers is absolutely the key to breaking the cycle of incarceration and doing what's right in the state of Oklahoma. So that was my message to you is you're doing a wonderful job. Warden Melton and her staff are well known throughout the state because they really are the one person, the one facility in the state that give a holistic approach to changing behaviors. So you should feel proud to be a part of this team that Warden Melton has, and again. The areas and the things that I've seen in the 1 year at James Crabtree is sometimes very, very shocking just because of the offenders that I have there. I have a lot of offenders that are well above 40 years old and doing lots and lots and lots of time. And so it's almost a unusual, strange feeling when you're talking to a man who's almost jovial about his life, but he is never getting out, never get out, And so there's an interesting balance that I've had to play for the past 19 years at Bill Johnson and then coming to Crabtree. So I really rely, just like Warden Melton does, on volunteers to provide a service that is absolutely meaningful in corrections. So, and that's really it. But since this is a small group, and like I said earlier, this is kind of keep it informal. I don't want to bring Warden Melton up here because she answers too many questions anyways. But anyways, 19 years here and then 1 year at Medium Security has been it's been an interesting ride for the past 20 years. So if you guys have any questions for me or anything about corrections in general, we can kind of talk about it. If not, oh yes, sir.
Okay, I'm not trying to be smart, but how many people escaped from Crabtree last year?
Well, I had one offender, and we define it as an escape. He was a young man that worked at my minimum security facility. He was working in my maintenance department. He jumped on the tracks and went east. And then he ran around a mile section and came back, right back to Helena and sat down until we came to find him. So he was gone for about 8 hours. And sometimes I wanted to find that as just a walk away, but we can't. It was minimum security, but he didn't climb a fence or go underneath, like you see in the movies. He walked away from a work crew.
Thank you.
You're welcome. How you doing, Mr. White?
What kind of onions are they?
Those are they huge white onions, huge, like two-handers.
Did you supply the whole state?
Yes, we. Is mincing the right term? Where you just, you're like really, really small bits, pieces.
They have a nitrogen flash freezer. And they run them
That's
through
right.
the nitrogen flash freezer. And they flash freeze them, and then they've got a gigantic freezer warehouse over there.
Yeah,
So they
you know
process them, and then they distribute them out in the state.
That's correct. What kind of barn is that called, Becky?
Round top.
A round top. It's a round top it's nothing but a freezer. There's about this much room to walk in and then go in the freezer. The whole thing is a huge freezer.
I never dreamed that Crabtree would tell that stuff.
I didn't either until I got there. I'm telling you, I was excited about the corn dogs, but
I will tell you that we used to keep our own mustard up in the warden's office so we could go do quality control.
I know. They talk, a lot of folks that are still there, they talk about the presentations they give and, visitors and some folks that we were able to give tours to. That's how we concluded. You get a corn dog, and they love it. We go through audits. Quite a few times, different variety of audits, and that's how how Crabtree used to conclude their audits. I was going to say bribe, but that's conclude their audits by a good corn dog.
You're gonna bite an onion just to go over there.
Mr. White, I have, when we do our regular searches during the onion season, that's probably the number one contraband item is an onion.
That's amazing.
He's not kidding when he says you can smell them all over town.
That's right. Okay. Yes, sir.
I question, a comment to you, Jason, because in all the time that we've come here at the prison, you were always like the go-to guy, or the guy to blame, maybe.
That's right.
If I ever called and said I needed to do something, or could I, you got to talk to Jason first. And you've always been so helpful, like when we brought in CD players and tried to work on the sounds, and I just want to say thank you.
Well, I appreciate that.
He's a good job.
You know what my role is now? I'm the no guy. It ain't happening. No. And it's not because I really am the no guy, but it's just a different environment over there. It's much, we have to be a little, and Warden Melton and her staff, this is a very unique minimum yard. I mean, it's not, there's nothing like it in the state. And they run a great, Chief Loudon does a great job with his security. It's just much, much different in the way that we have to approach business over there. Not much different. It's not much different, but it is different. Yeah. We have different expectations for our offenders.
What do you think is the number one need in your volunteer list of things that volunteers could do? What's the number one need?
I tell you, volunteer-wise at Crabtree, I would love for there to be volunteers that are willing to provide a cognitive program like they do here at Bill Johnson. And we do have that, but we have the absolute need for offenders to help change their behavior. We have some very mature offenders that have aged out of problems, but we still have those that are 35 and 45 years old that haven't seen the light yet. And we really do need some assistance in, providing something that's viable and meaningful to them that'll help. Because a lot of them are going home and they're moving on with their lives, but the majority of them are staying within the system. And it's really important that they, obey the rules and do what we ask them to do so that they can live in a peaceful, healthy, clean environment.
That's hard to find, isn't it? Yes.
Oh yeah, sure. Especially when you have so many offenders. There's so many of them, and they all have needs. And the great work that you guys do as volunteers is exactly that. I mean, it's volunteer, and there's just not enough folks that are willing to provide those services. All right. Anything else? Thank you for having me. It's good to talk to everyone.